This is ContraZoom.
Where we go back and forth about film.
I'm Dakota Arsenault.
And I'm Rachel Ho.
After a few weeks off for the holidays, we are back. With 2022 now in the rearview mirror, we thought it would be fun to look back at it by discussing the top news stories of the movie world. I thought we can start with maybe a brief recap of this podcast, and that is we produced 47 episodes in the calendar year, which is pretty crazy since it feels like we took several breaks throughout the year, but only ended up missing 5 weeks without a show. It was the most we ever produced, surpassing the 44 shows we made in both 2021 and 2020. We conducted 6 interviews across 4 shows. We did 10 episodes of our A24 retrospective, covered 5 film festivals, did 3 Better Know contributors, did 2 make remakes, 1 a history of, and made our very first video podcast. It was an exciting year, capped off with us joining the That Shell family of podcasts, and started a coffee account for fans of the pod to help us produce better content for those that want to give us a little tip. How's that all sound to you, Rachel?
That's very interesting when you put it all, like when you lay it all like that, like in such successive order. Sounds like a lot. It sounds like we did a lot. It doesn't really. We did a lot, yeah. It doesn't feel like it though. Like it doesn't feel like we did that much, but that's cool. I love that we did so many of the A24 ones though. That actually sounds accurate. We did do quite a bit of those.
Yeah, it's funny because like sometimes I wonder, I'm like, man, how did I fill the schedule with show ideas? Like, I remember it being such a struggle all the time, and now I'm like, I don't know what to do. We're doing an A24 retrospective. Yeah. Easy.
Well, you just let like the cat out of the bag that whenever we don't have an idea, just do an A24 episode.
Yeah, well, like I don't want to call it filler episodes, but like there's well over 100 A24 films, and every year they seem to make more and more of them. So like, if we want to get through this list, I think, we did 10 this year, but I think we've only done like 15 in total. Like,
yeah,
we're a long ways off.
I would like to say I'd like to do more remake episodes. Those are fun to do.
Yeah. I always try to those are tough because you need to kind of plan them in advance, and it's a struggle because if it's coming out to streaming, it makes it super easy. But if it's coming out in theaters, then you and I both have to see it like within the first week or two for it to still be relevant, because we don't I don't know. I don't really want to do a remake of a movie from last year that came out like 6 months earlier, because what's really the point of that? But I don't know. Maybe people do want that. I don't know.
Well, I would say, I brought this up to you before, but the movie Living,
it's on the schedule.
It's coming out. When is that? Next week, I think it's coming out. Or maybe
it's coming out end of January.
Yeah, in Canada anyway. That's when it's coming
out. If you check our schedule document, it's on the list.
Yeah, no, haven't looked at it. Won't lie, haven't checked it in like a month. Even when we said we're doing the A24 next week, I was like, oh, that's a surprise to me. That's great.
Not really.
I was like, that's great. That's excellent.
Yeah, I actually have the whole schedule planned out through the end of the Oscars.
Oh, I should take a look at that. Yeah. I'll take a look.
Yeah,
I'll take a look and see what's going on.
You're about to be on ContraZoom vacation if you want.
I've been on a vacation from just everything. My mind has been blank for the last month.
Now, everyone's been doing their best of the year list and stuff like that. If you know this show, it's a point of laughter for some people, including you, Rachel. I wait until after the Oscars because there's so many movies to catch up on, and a lot of them don't get distribution until 2022 anyways. And so I don't know, I sort of struggle with how to place movies that are playing in festivals and get limited release in 2022 but don't get wide release until 23, and so I can still count them as 22 movies. How do you sort of make your best of the year lists?
I think I'm in a bit of a different position from you because I think this year I've seen more movies than you now, even though I don't have the letterbox to prove it. But I think that I actually more or less I've seen most of the stuff that my guess is that will be in the Oscars, that will be kind of, and that's from other things that we don't need to discuss here. But it's I think I've done pretty well. I've got my top 10 together. I haven't yet done a post on it, but I will eventually. And I think I am missing out maybe a couple movies that I'm going to check out this week before I make it official. But yeah, pretty much my top 10's all together, I would say. I think it's pretty, and I like it. I'm very happy with my top 10.
Nice. Yeah, you have a bit of a added luxury of being able to get screeners either through your own accord, through your own relationships, or stuff with Exclaim or That Shell for the Asian cut. So you have a bit more avenues. Whereas for me, it's pretty much like, well, if I can get it myself, then I can get it myself. Otherwise,
Yeah.
I'm not seeing it.
Yeah, I mean, I have a massive advantage on that, to be fair. Like, I mean, especially after joining TFCA, I think that that's been a big one because they've been trying to get us into screenings ahead of time so that we can vote for the awards there. But yeah, it's a luxury I'm willing to accept because it's quite fun being able to watch all these movies and have a reason to watch them.
Yeah, I'm always jealous when people are talking about the screeners or when they get the packages, especially people like Thomas who like will post the swag that he gets. I'm just like, oh man, that's so cool.
Yeah, one day you'll get there. One day, don't worry.
Will I?
Who
I feel
knows?
like I need to actually cover more new movies to actually do that.
My thing with those swag boxes, though, is like, what do you do with all that stuff? Like, to
Yeah.
me, there's some things that are kind of cool, and like, I know there's like food and stuff in that, so that's good. But there's a lot of junk. Maybe this is not helping my ability to get more swag. But to be honest, I don't like having a lot of like random knickknacks around. So yeah, those things are as much as I like getting the one thing I'll say, I like getting the discs. Like I like getting hard copies of I was actually talking with Matthew Simpson about this and we were laughing that like some of the discs ahead of time they have that warning of like don't copy this. This is just for your consideration and just your viewing kind of thing. And one of them, I can't remember which movie it was, but they said like after you're done watching, snap the disc in half and like throw it away. I was like, who's gonna do that?
Yeah. No, I won't do that.
I'm not gonna do that. That's wasteful. It's very wasteful. But those are the things that I think I appreciate getting more than like a coffee table book or stuff like that. Like I like getting the discs because it makes it. I don't know. It's nice being able to just pop something into your Blu-ray player versus having to hook up your computer or whatever. These are all little random niggles that I have, but yeah. But I did see Thomas gets a lot of the Netflix stuff.
Yeah,
and then the Pinocchio coffee table book, I have to admit, is very beautiful. So that's a cool thing to get.
Swag topic aside, let's maybe get back on topic a little bit and talk about some of the biggest news stories of the year. We kind of came up with a little list of some of the interesting stuff. Neither of us are really interested in the celebrity gossip or drama, so you're not going to hear us talking about the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial because that's just nonsense and has nothing to do with actual movies and is just stupid, frankly. So that's my thoughts on that. But you won't hear us talk about anything like that. We don't really care about relationships and shit like that. So because that's all that is, and just gossip and nonsense. So none of that really matters.
I will say, I'm just gonna stop. I delve into a little bit of gossip every now and then. I don't mind a bit of hot gossip. The Johnny Depp stuff, though, I didn't touch that because to me that's not gossip. Like that should not be gossip, and it was turned into gossip. That's a whole other thing. Mm-hmm. But I really resented how reality show driven that became because I'm like, that's a really serious case that was up there, and it got turned into. And I already saw a commercial for some like movie that they made out of it for Tubi. I was like,
God.
Yeah, I was like, this is I find that ridiculous. Like I really don't like that. But other hot goss though, I'm into it. I know we're gonna get into it, but like the Don't Worry Darling stuff, I was very, very much into that.
That's the only one that we're gonna talk about. And for two reasons, and we'll kind of get to that later. But yeah, let's start off. And I think the most interesting thing of the past year was sort of the resurgence of horror as a mainstream genre has really taken off. And you talk to horror fans, they'll either say two things: horror either is never left, or horror never gets the respect it deserves. There only seems to be two camps of horror fans. But this year there was like some legit, I feel like, resurgence of the horror genre. And I think the biggest one to talk about is the success of Terrifier 2. Now, to 99% of movie fans, you probably have never heard of this movie. You never will. But like, what you need to know about this movie is this is a super, super low budget horror movie made for a couple $100,000, which is peanuts for today. and grossed a few $1 million. And once again, that sounds like nothing, but this is a movie that made, I think it's like, 50 times its original budget back, which is absolutely insanity for any movie these days, and makes it one of the most successful movies on a cost per gross ratio, which is absolutely crazy. But then, you have tons of other movies like Barbarian, Smile, Scream 5, Fresh, Nope, X and Pearl, Men, all of which did quite well at the box office and kind of sort of dominated a lot of movie discussions this year, which was pretty crazy in my mind. And nice to see that genre is making a pretty big comeback.
Yeah, I like that. Growing up in the late 90s ish, horror definitely had its like Scream, funny enough, was part of that
Yep.
as well. And like, I remember those horror movies very, very fondly. And I like that now it kind of feels like we're back into that stage. It's not necessarily like 70s slasher phase of horror, although, I mean, X and Pearl kind of, to me, recall a lot of those 70s movies, which is really cool. But I love that there's a lot of new takes on it. And I think that it's been slowly building. Like, I think it's Jordan Peele's and the Ari Asters of the world have definitely been making horror something a little bit different. And, like you said, horror heads are always like, oh, horror doesn't get the credit it deserves, which is true. But I think that with those movies like Hereditary, Midsommar, Get Out, obviously those ones, I think that made it like that pushed horror into. It sounds really snobby, but like it pushed horror into like an auteur kind of realm in film, and I think that helped it out a lot, quite a bit. And then so when you have movies like Barbarian and Smile and Fresh, which are not complete, like I don't think that they do what Get Out did to the genre, but they are like really nice updates of that late 90s horror that I like so much. So I think it's amazing. Like I love that this year horror just took over. I think that's really fantastic. And also it was like different types of horror, like different horror for different people, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And what you're kind of talking about, a friend of the show, Callum McNabb from Scared to Juice, excellent horror podcast. If you like horror movies, definitely check out that show because it's always insightful. He just put out his best horror movies of the year episode. So definitely check that one out. He uses the term elevated horror, which is not something he obviously came up with, but his sort of hatred towards that because it sort of allows people who are not horror fans, maybe people like myself, you would probably call that, who don't like to really foray into some of the grittier, grimier aspects of horror, and instead like it if there is a message or an analogy, the stuff that like Hereditary, Midsommar, or the ilk of that kind of do, where it's hoity-toity and not necessarily real horror and stuff like that. And of the list, I would say Men is probably the only one that I mentioned that sort of falls into that category of, oh, this is an analogy for something else, which was, quite on the nose, as you've talked about a few times, Rachel, of you not being a fan of Men this year. But yeah, overall, I agree. There was sort of like a wide range of horror movies. And like, I know it's not my type of movie, but I am quite curious about Terrifier 2, especially since you apparently don't need to watch the first one to follow along. Did you watch that one at all or no?
I haven't seen it, no. I mean, it is one of those things that's impressive. I find it really impressive when these like little tiny movies can, and I will give a shout out to Skinamarink, which is Kyle Edward Ball.
Another one.
Yeah, his movie's coming out. So it premiered in Fantasia and it's coming out in theaters and on Shudder end of this month, mid-January, I think. But I love this idea of like these little tiny movies that literally have lived because of social media. Like that's how the word of mouth spread around, was because horror fans picked up on these movies, and then it just caught like wildfire, and it caught everybody's attention. Like I love that Terrifier 2 caught fire so quickly, and it just seemed like everybody, even if you weren't into horror like yourself, like you knew about it and you were talking about it. But like you said, it is still kind of niche. Like, you're saying like 99% of people probably don't know what it is. And I would say the same thing for Skinamarink, but the fact that there are a good amount of people looking to get it, like wanting to watch it, trying to seek these movies out. I think that that's pretty incredible. And then not just to say about horror either. Like there's always been talk about how comic book movies are taking over cinemas and and all this kind of stuff, and it's only big budget things that kind of work now, and there's no more room for the middle. So I think it's really great when you see these little tiny movies picking up steam, and which is also, say what you will about Twitter, like it is important for marketing and advertising for indie people, creatives as well. So yeah, I think it's phenomenal that movies like that have been making such an impact in the way that they have.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I know we've both sort of discussed this on the show when Matt Damon gave that interview and he sort of talked about the death of the mid-budget film. And I feel like we're slowly getting a bit of a rise of the low-budget film able to be profitable again, which is so nice. Because like you're always going to have, filmmakers making micro-budget films because, they're trying to make their calling card to get noticed and things like that. And they'll play at a few festivals and never really see the light of day. But it's nice that we're finally getting some of these, low to mid-budget films be somewhat successful again, which is great.
Yeah. And that's, although I was going to say it's a film festival, like a pat on the back for film festivals as well, but I don't think Terrifier 2 made it to a film festival. I think it just, I think that one's actually incredibly unique that it just ended up blowing up the way that it did.
Yeah, I know it played a couple film festivals as like a midnight screening sort of thing. It played one in Vancouver. I think it was called like VHS Festival, which was like Vancouver Horror or something or other. I don't know. But it was more like, hey, this movie's been making the circuit for the last 2 months, and we've got a screening here in Vancouver at like an actual art house theater at the Rio. Come out and see it. And I think people from the crew might have been there or something. I don't know exactly. But like, yeah, it wasn't like it was like it premiered at Fantasia, it played Sundance, it did this, it did that. It didn't.
Right. That's really that's amazing. Like this little tiny budget, it joined a festival because of the hype that it was already receiving versus getting the hype from the festival, which is the route that Skinamarink took.
Yes.
So, yeah, that's really cool. I think it's amazing. And I hope that we start seeing, I know this coming year, there's going to be a few more horror movies, and some of them look pretty awesome. So I'm interested to see, especially like what a younger generation's going to do of filmmakers, that what they're going to do with the genre. Cause I think it's in very good hands. So people like Callum and can rest easy that their favorite genre is going to be doing well for a while.
Yeah, we're finally at the point now where the people that were raised on social media are now like adults and know how to use the system. It's like it's not to get like too political or something like that, but like it's always like funny when politicians are trying to engage with young people and like the young people just know how to use social media so much better. It's like you can't come at people who like were molded on Twitter.
Yeah, I know nothing about how to use social media. I'm really bad at it. So, and it is, I see, I was talking to the girl who does, Sydney, who does the social media for Exclaim. I was like, how do you do it? I was like, how do you do this? I like copy a lot of her stuff of like how she formats things, but cause I'm just like, I don't have a pulse on how to use social media the best way, because we were kind of in that generation that was caught in between. Like we did have it when we were younger, but not like preteen age. Like we didn't have it at that because it didn't exist back then, obviously. Like the internet barely existed back then. God, that makes it sound really old, but but it's true. Like we were kind of that weird hybrid phase where we had one foot in, one foot out. But you're right, it's entirely different for a generation that they've only ever known having the internet at their disposal. Like that's been there since they were young. And then these different platforms of social media, whether it was Facebook or Twitter, Instagram, all that kind of stuff, and TikTok, obviously. But yeah, it's incredible what young people are doing with social media. I would like to learn from them. That's actually one thing I'm going to do this year. I'm going to try to take a course on social media, see if I can figure out how to do it.
Okay, Grandma.
I know, it's terrible. I can't believe like I've already fallen behind on like, because I've always been very good with like keeping up with technology, and then I've already, after Snapchat came out, I was like, oh, I'm done, I'm finished, I can't do this anymore.
That's funny. Yeah, I agree. I'm not on Snapchat.
I don't think it exists anymore. Snapchat, does it?
Yeah, it does. It
Oh,
does.
wow.
I work
Okay.
with some people in their early 20s, and that's their primarily way
Really?
to message people.
Wow. I
Yeah.
thought Snapchat was gone.
Nope. Nope.
Interesting. Yeah, there you go.
Okay. Continuing on, and talking about another movie that was quite successful, although this one's a bit harder to track, and that is the surprise hit of RRR being a word of mouth giant on Netflix. If people don't know what this movie is, but it's an Indian film, and I believe the language is Telugu. I apologize, I don't have it in front of me if I'm mispronouncing it there, but it's not a Hindi language film. But yeah, it was a huge hit on Netflix. I remember when it kind of showed up, I was like, what is this movie? And then now, like, almost everyone's talking about how it was like in their top 10 movies of the year, which is absolutely crazy considering it's 3 hours long. It's a giant epic that spans a long period of time. But yeah, this was a huge hit on Netflix and internationally. And you look at the box office, it made $11 million in North America and $91 million in the rest of the world, which is just crazy. This is a $100 million movie buoyed entirely by an international audience.
I think so. I can't speak for obviously the other territories, but I know in Toronto, like Cineplex and the big chains didn't pick it up. How it got screenings here was for like from private cinemas, like independent cinemas. They were picking it up and getting the distribution to show it in Toronto. And obviously, if anyone's familiar with Toronto, there's a very quite a big South Asian community here, but it, like you said, it wasn't actually just the South Asian community that was clinging. Like everybody seemed to be on this one,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, it's. I don't know if another Bollywood movie has really made it like this. Like obviously, Bollywood, they churn out hundreds of movies a year, and many of them are incredibly successful. But this seems to be the first that I can think of that kind of came to the West and was a huge deal to not like for outside the South Asian community. It really made some waves there. Have you seen it? RRR?
I have not. No, I was really hoping to catch up with it before we recorded, but I
Yeah.
just didn't have time because it is 3 hours long.
It
But I
is
do still want to watch it.
it is the most bonkers movie. Like it's the most excessive thing I've ever seen. And like I was talking to some Jonah actually who on who I met on Twitter and I chat with. He was asking me about it and I was like, you need to be in the right headspace for this movie. Like you really need to be in the mood for something so over the top and ridiculous. Like it is not something to really take seriously. It is just, and I don't mean that in a flippant way either. But it's just something that you need to be in the headspace for something very excessive. You know, like the shots in it are just ridiculous. Like every few minutes you think, okay, this is as nuts as this movie's going to get. And then like 10 minutes later, it goes somewhere completely berserk that you just aren't expecting. But it's a really fun wild ride. And I'll point this out. I can't really speak to this too much, but I have had some South Asian friends who have pointed out to me that like there's a lot of propaganda in this movie, which is obvious. I think like there's a lot of literal wave flagging in the movie, but there is kind of another subtext going on, which to my understanding has become a bit of an issue over in India, which is partly why I think it's done better outside of India than it has domestically for them. So I know that there's a lot of kind of political discussion as well about the movie, which I'm not going to get into because I'm not nearly well educated enough on it.
Yeah, like it's definitely there. There's obviously certain countries. If a movie comes out of there, you kind of need to look at it with a bit of a grain of salt. Of like, okay, what is the message that this
Mm-hmm.
country is trying to make? Something like anytime a movie comes from mainland China, you sort of have to look at it in the same sort of lens of like, okay, so what's the angle here? I'm gonna watch and enjoy it, but like you're probably saying something else here that I'm probably missing that is directed to a certain audience.
Well, I'll say that Hollywood movies do that too, though. I mean,
Oh,
Top Gun,
absolutely.
we're going to talk about Top Gun later, but like Top Gun absolutely does that. Even, what was it? I think it was Captain Marvel, even that had some money thrown at it from the American military or the Navy or something like that.
Yeah.
So it's like, it does happen I shouldn't say all around the world. I can't think of the last time Canada did some sort of, I don't think we really have that in us though, to do something like that. But like, it is such a common thing to do. And but you're like, but I think that's kind of the important thing, is like you said, is to be critical of everything that you watch. Like, it is fun, and don't take it too seriously, but there are other elements involved. Like, if you want to dig deeper into a movie like RRR, there's a lot of, I believe, some really interesting kind of political commentary in there, which probably goes over the head of a lot of people. And not to say it's because people are dumb, it's just because when you watch it, you'll understand why. Because it's so over the top that you just don't think that there could be anything else to it other than this is just really fun to watch.
Yeah.
Like, a guy throws a motorcycle at one point. It's great. It's great. Like, it's just, there's like tigers and lions. Like, just, it's amazing. And there's I kind of don't want to spoil it for you, but I kind of do at the same time. So there is an interval. They put an intermission in the middle of the movie. And when it happens, they put like a big thing that says interval, and then the R's are 3 R's. It's really funny. I don't know why. I just thought it was really amusing when they did that. But yeah, it's a great time though. And I can see why. I didn't watch it in theaters. I watched it at home. But I can see that watching this in a movie theater, especially like a late night screening, would be incredibly fun to do, because it's just a berserk movie. And there's a lot of John Woo influences, I'll say that. Like, you can see a bit of the John Woo excess is in there as well.
Well, good. That's I am very excited to watch it, and I do plan to watch it before, so that way I can't leave this type of movie off of my viewing schedule before I make my best movies of the year list, basically.
And I'll say too, for people who are worried about like the 3-hour runtime, honestly, it doesn't feel like 3 hours. I'll say that much. Like, it never really felt like it was like a slog to get through. This year has been a lot of long movies. Like a lot of 2.5 to 3 hour movies. And some of them you can really, really feel it. And I mean, I've watched like 90-minute movies that felt like, they felt like they were going on forever. But this one, I felt like it was, just because it's so much, like, there's so much fast-paced stuff, it just doesn't feel like, you don't feel antsy. I didn't anyways. I don't feel antsy watching it. Whereas other ones, I definitely felt a little bit antsy. And there's an intermission. And I think more movies need to put intermissions. We need to do that again.
Excellent. Good to know. All right, let's move on to the next story, which is a bit more of a sadder one. And this is Bruce Willis, who has decided to retire from acting due to his diagnosis of aphasia, which aphasia is a disorder that affects how you communicate. And it usually happens after you have a heart attack or a stroke. But basically, it will eventually render Bruce Willis unable to communicate with words at all, which is really tragic. And it sort of puts into context a bit of where his career has been at in recent years, because he sort of talked about just doing movies for paydays. And if you look at his IMDb, the man has hundreds of movies that you have never heard of before. And most of them have come out in the last 5 or so years, because he legitimately will put out about 10 movies a year, and you're like, where are these movies? Who is producing them? Who is watching them? All this sort of stuff. And I remember watching a video where someone ranked every Bruce Willis movie from a recent year, and he's like, the common denominator is he's usually only in a few scenes. He's usually sitting down behind a desk, and he's alone in the scene, usually either talking on a phone or talking to someone off camera who you don't see in the same shot. So obviously it's all kind of been done with like one person, one camera setup, all on the same day sort of thing. And he just like kind of bangs these out. And it was like, well, why is he doing this? You look back and like, he's legitimately a good actor sometimes. And, he's always had a history of, he's a bit difficult to work with and things like that. So, maybe that's why his career's kind of slowed down. But he apparently is doing these movies specifically to kind of make as much money as possible to leave it for his family after he goes, because he knows he doesn't have a lot of time left. And apparently he's known that he's had to retire for a few years now, and is just trying to do as much as possible. But it truly is sad, especially since like you go look at his filmography, and the last notable thing that I see that he did was he had a cameo in the Between Two Ferns movie, which I guess isn't really that. He was in an adaptation of Motherless Brooklyn that wasn't really well received. Glass was probably his last actual hit movie, but that was in 2019.
Yeah, it's one of the, like I mean we were just talking about feeling kind of old because of the internet. Like this kind of thing also makes me like to know that the stars that we grew up with are starting to become unwell, and eventually they're going to start passing away and stuff like that. That is something that kind of takes me back, because to me Bruce Willis, he started off before I would say we were like of age to know who he
Mm-hmm.
was. So he's just always been around. Like Bruce was just always been around. And like you said, he was doing all these things that were what we used to call like direct to video. I guess now it's direct to digital is what they call it now. But like it was always kind of sad to see, because everyone was thinking, what's he doing? Like
Yeah.
usually when that happens, I hate to say it's usually what happens is like after somebody has like a really big divorce or something like that, then they need to do a bunch of these movies. You go, but he's married. Like he's not, him and Demi Moore got divorced a long time ago. Like it's not a big deal anymore. So it was always a big question mark. And it's interesting to me that like the timing of it as well was really interesting, because when it started making a bit of waves on Twitter, that somebody said, does anybody realize how many movies Bruce Willis was in last year? And everyone's obviously like, no, how many movies could he have been in? Like, we didn't even know he was in one. And then you go and look at his IMDb and it's filled. It's just got so many credits to it from 1 year alone that none of us really noticed. And then everyone started making their jokes and poking fun and blah, blah, blah. And then a few months later, it comes out, actually, it's incredibly sad, the reason that he went and did all these movies, and has, as you said, just been kind of searching for a payday. So it's very, very, I don't know. It's a weird thing when people you don't even know, like we obviously don't know Bruce Willis, but it kind of, it gets you a little bit, because you go, oh, like I grew up with this guy. Like he's John McClane. He's all these people, and now to think that we're not going to see another movie from him, especially like a mainstream movie, we won't see that from him. And but for anybody who's watched Babylon and has this idea in their head right now, it's like he will always kind of live on in movies, because every time anybody at Christmas time turns on Die Hard, like there's Bruce again in his prime and glory. So yeah, but it is very, very sad. But I'm glad that we have a massive amount of movies to look back on him for.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's the sort of thing where he's probably not going to pass away anytime soon, but he's just
Mm-hmm.
kind of disappear from the
Yeah.
public eye.
Which I like. I like when actors. Gene Hackman was another one that kind of appeared again, because he just very quietly retired, right? And he just didn't really make a big fuss about it. He just stopped working, and then it kind of pops up that he's been a painter for the last 15, 20 years or something like that, and he looks really happy. So I think that it's nice when actors are able to just kind of step away and quietly do their own thing. Obviously, I know for him it's a little bit different. It's a bit more forced, I would assume, than he probably would have wanted it to be. But you know, I hope. I also had like, have you seen some of the Instagram posts from, I think from Demi Moore? Like it's very sweet. Like they're all together and they all hang out, and I think that that's really nice.
Yeah, his family definitely seemed to have rallied around him and
Mm-hmm.
sort of presented this united front of like, we're here for Bruce the person, not Bruce the movie star.
Exactly. Yeah, I saw John Travolta posted something about it. I was like, oh, that made me really sad, because John Travolta obviously he lost a number of people last year too. So I thought
Yeah,
that was very sweet of him to do that.
yeah, absolutely. Okay, now moving on, the next kind of two topics are kind of connected in a way, but either way, it's a lot to unpack, and I don't think we're going to be able to do this story justice. But I think either way is something that kind of needs to be talked about, because it's a huge part of the industry, and that's the sort of shakeup of DC, of the Warner Brothers and Discovery merger and all that sort of stuff that's happening. And that's the first part of the first prong of the story is a guy named David Zaslav, who became the head of the Warner Discovery post their merger, and basically canceling everything, saying that Warner is in huge amount of debts. I think I read something about like they owe 10 billion in debt, and they were only able to pay off 2 billion after this merger with Discovery money and all this sort of stuff. And so they're They're doing things like canceling fully completed movies to do tax write-offs, and that's included 2 movies. One of them being Batgirl, which was literally completely done, and the other one being Scoob 2, which I think was about to go to being scored and sound mixing it and sort of the final touches and all that sort of stuff, but it had already been animated and the voiceovers had been done, and both of those have been just completely axed and will literally never see the light of day. Because they cannot see that, otherwise they will lose whatever write-off they try to do. But then it's things like cleaning up the HBO streaming service because they've got a whole bunch of product on there that isn't being watched enough to justify the server costs to host it, basically, which is completely wild that a company is just so willing to give up on its property and just like be like, well, it's gone. And that sort of then creates a whole other discussion about the idea of physical media versus digital media. What do you actually own when you are, subscribed to a streaming service? What do you have access to? All this sort of stuff, because it seems like every week there'll be like a popular Twitter post of being like, hey, do you remember this popular movie? You can't stream it anywhere and you can't buy a Blu-ray of it. And it's just like, wow, what's the state of film preservation if that can be a thing that happens still? So it was absolutely wild. And it seemed like every day there was like a new crazy story that was coming out about this. Was this one that you had kind of been following along with, Rachel?
Definitely. I'm vastly interested in like the business side of show business as much as I love movies, but like the business side of things, it's endlessly fascinating to me because I think sometimes we get so caught up in, you go watch a movie and you love it and you love the characters, you love the story, you love, the filmmaking technical stuff behind it. But then at the end of the day, it's like, it is a product, which maybe we don't really want to admit that sometimes when we're talking about art, but it is a product. Like we've commercialized art as just a general thing, like anything in art these days. And it's very sad that that's the case. But it's like any other business out there that has to operate and they have to look at, the P&L and see how it works. But this to me was it really seemed like I just didn't get it at first. And without knowing the full financial side of it, like I don't think that we have all of the information that they have, for good reasons, obviously. But without knowing all that, it just seemed like such a strange decision that, especially for Batgirl, it's like, it's done, it's ready to go. And people were really looking forward to it as well, actually. Like, I think people were really interested to see what Leslie Grace was going to do. And cause like, there was a lot of early hype that, hey, like they had already screened it too, like for audience test audiences, sorry. And it done decently well, like not gangbusters, but it had done well. And so there were pretty positive talk about it. And then for them to just completely scrap it with not even saying, oh, it's not going to get a theatrical, it's just going to go to streaming, which that already is kind of like, oh, that kind of sucks. Like a Batgirl movie isn't going to go to theaters. But then when they said, no, you're never going to see it, I just thought it's such a strange business decision that, I mean, it must make sense to them because they obviously very, well, we presume smart people and they know what they're doing. But it was such an odd, I'll actually share a funny thing in a little name drop here. During TIFF, when I interviewed, we did a roundtable with Brendan Fraser and Samuel D. Hunter for The Whale. He made like a joke about Leslie Grace, not about Leslie Grace, but about Batgirl not finding, not being shown or something like that. Like he just made this like little joke about it, and none of us kind of laughed because it was just announced around that time, and so we were just kind of like, oh, this is a bit, we don't know what we're supposed to do here. And then he went, you guys can laugh, it's okay, like it's fine, but and he even said, he goes, I heard Leslie Grace is amazing in it, and he goes, I haven't seen it though. So it just sucks. Like it's not even just the Leslie Graces of who this should have been such a big opportunity for her. A ton of people work on movies, and it sucks that like their hard work, that a thing that they devoted at least a year to, especially the behind, like the crew, they devote so much time to it and it's never going to see the light of day. Like that really, really sucks to me. Like that more so than anything else, is the thing that like, kind of sticks with me, is that there's so many people whose hard work is never going to be seen now. And I don't know, like you can't even use that on your resume to show like, hey, I worked on this, because there's nothing to show.
Yeah.
And that to me is, yeah. But again, they must have a good reason for it. And, I know you're about to get into the second prong of this, but it's like, hopefully they have a strategy ahead of what they're going to do to kind of fill this hole. And it seems like they're always on like a chase with Marvel, which I never thought was a really good idea, because Marvel is so far ahead that there's no point trying to copy them, which they were doing for a really long time. So I'm curious to see what like James Gunn and Peter, whatever his name is, what they do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the sort of like the last thing about this sort of stuff is it really seems like David Zaslav was brought in specifically to be a hatchet man. He was said, you're going to come in, you're going to be the face of the bad decisions. We're going to pay you a lot of money, and then when this is all over and things have settled down and we're back on track, we're going to move you to a different department, give you a big buyout, and someone else gets to be the good guy again afterwards. And they're coming in to sort of save the day. That's what it really sort of seems like it is. Because you see this sort of stuff all the time, especially with like big tech companies where they like come in, they lay off like, 30% of the staff, they cut costs, they do a whole bunch of stuff, and then they leave. And then someone else comes in and be like, hey, I got all these great ideas, because now they have money again and they can start spending money, but they needed to do these really hard, brutal decisions that impact a lot of people's lives and livelihoods in order to get back on track. And that's obviously something that like most of us will literally never be able to comprehend having to do, because as you just said, Batgirl is completed, and it's different from like the Pixar movies being unceremoniously dumped on Disney Plus, and we're all like aghast of like, how could you do that to this movie? How could you do that to Turning Red? That makes no sense. How could you do that to this movie? Like, this movie deserves to be seen in the theater. And instead it'd just be like, yeah, well, instead you're just not going to get to see it at all.
Yeah, it's yeah, it's hard to like the human element side of it is, I can't imagine any of them. You'd have to be like a sociopath, right, to not care about that kind of stuff. But so I mean, somebody had to do it, and it sucks. It just really sucks. But it's also amazing to think that a company as big as Warner's and HBO and them, like they're losing money. Like, what are you guys talking about? Do you know what I mean? Like, they're one of the biggest studios in the world, and not even just studio. Like, they're a massive company in general. And it's kind of nuts to think like, oh, you guys are losing money. Interesting. And I will point that this is another thing. This is nothing to do with that, but the fact that HBO Max, when they teamed up with Discovery Plus, and now they're dropping the HBO because they don't want either of their names, and it's just gonna be called Max. I was like, what are you guys doing? Like, why is it just being called Max now? Lots of business decisions that I'm glad I don't have to make, and would never want to make, quite frankly. So yeah, I mean, I again, I hope that just they have a plan, and I hope that kind of things wrap up. And it's a bit and the only reason I say that is because I'm kind of sick of Disney owning and dominating everything. So having other studios, like Universal's killing it right now. They're doing really, really well. I would actually say Paramount is very quietly doing quite well as well. We need competition. Like, we need these studios, these legacy studios, to be doing well. And if they're not doing well, then we need to make room for new ones. But it can't just be Disney all the time, because that makes things incredibly boring and stagnant, and just not good. It's not good. Like, it's never good when anybody in Canada knows this. Like, when you just have one or two large companies running everything, it's never a good thing for consumers or audiences in this case. So I want Warner's to do well, just for the sake of competition, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And then obviously, as we've alluded to, the second part of the story is DC, as you said, has long been sort of chasing Marvel and trying to replicate its stories as far as like success in bringing obscure characters that don't cost a lot of money to get the rights to become household names and all this sort of stuff, and expand the brand and all this sort of things. And they've had a couple different people in charge of the DC film world, and none of them have been successful because they keep trying to chase something that is unobtainable. And despite people being like, no, just do your own thing, they keep trying to make it Marvel light. And it seems like they finally have found the people to run it, and that is James Gunn and Peter Safran. Obviously, James Gunn became involved in DC when he got fired from Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 over some past inappropriate tweet, and DC very quickly scooped him up for a reboot of the Suicide Squad, which, you know, was a huge success and led to him making Peacemaker as well, which was also a huge success. And despite the fact that he was hired back by Disney Marvel to do Guardians 3, and he did the holiday special as well for them, and seems to be allowed to do both with no problem. He is now the head of DC Films. I think he's going to be doing more of the creative planning, where Peter Safran is going to be more of the brains behind the organization and money and all that sort of stuff. But it seems interesting, and you know, along with doing a major shakeup, they also announced quite a few things. They're not moving forward with a third Patty Jenkins Wonder Woman movie. No more Ben Affleck as Batman. They are still, for some godforsaken reason, keeping the Flash movie with Ezra Miller in it, and they have decided to keep Aquaman Jason Momoa. At first, before the James Gunn Peter Safran news was announced, Henry Cavill was announced that he was coming back to do another Superman movie, as was evident by his end credit cameo in Black Adam. And then as soon as James Gunn and Peter Safran got announced, they announced that Henry Cavill was no longer coming back as Superman because they were going in a different, younger direction. And it's just like, wow, what a mouthful all that stuff is.
But isn't it funny how we've spent maybe the last, how long would it have been? 10 years? Has it been that long? Since like Man of Steel came out? When did Man of Steel come out?
Yeah.
For probably 10 years at least now. But it's so funny that we've spent that all this time, like, to varying degrees slagging off these, like, the very people that you're saying were like, Henry Cavill probably missed it because he's a very good Superman. We all know that. But people just haven't been liking those movies. And then when they announce like, hey, we're clean slating it now, everyone's like, wait, but how are we going to know the end of it? Like, there were a lot of people who didn't like Wonder Woman 2. You know, like, people were not happy with that movie. People loved the first Wonder Woman, but the second one didn't really hit. But then even when the third one gets pulled, everyone's like, but wait, like, we wanted to see how that ended. But it was like, yeah, but you guys all said you hated the second one. And so I find that kind of funny, because it is that idea of you don't know what you got till it's gone. People are just like, wait, we're not going to see Ben Affleck anymore. It's interesting. I've been... to me, this kind of dates back to the Snyder Cut hoopla of, you know, what was going on at DC. Like, they clearly had a bit of mismanagement, let's say, over what they were going to do with the DC comics, because, you know, they saw the success at Marvel and then they thought, we got to replicate that. But yeah, they didn't necessarily have to, because Batman movies in particular have always been the thing. Like, I shouldn't say they were the ones who revitalized the comic book genre in movies, because that's probably an X-Men Spider-Man thing. But, you know, the Batman movies have been such a mainstay. Like, they were kind of the first, I guess they were the first. Them and Superman would have been the first big kind of comic book movies that were made back in the day. And it's such a shame what has happened to those characters. Like, you have a great actor like Henry Cavill, who, I shouldn't say he's a great actor. He's a good actor, and he's very good though at Superman. Like, I loved his Superman. I thought, and it's not even just the fact that he just looks like Superman, but that's just a physical thing. But he just, like, embodied the character, and you could tell if you ever watched an interview with him, like, he really enjoyed playing Superman. Like, he had a lot of reverence for the character and for the history of it, and, you know, you don't always get that matchup. So it's a shame for me that he's the biggest one that I'm kind of sad that he never got another Superman movie. Like, he only had Man of Steel, and then everything else was Batman and Superman, Justice League, you know, the little clip in Black Adam, like you said. But he never got to do his own thing ever again. And I was like, that to me was always really crappy for him, because he did deserve better for that. Like, even Wonder Woman got 2 movies on her own. So yeah. And also, we never got a Ben Affleck movie on his own either, which I thought was because I actually, I know it's a bit of a controversial thing, but I actually thought Ben Affleck was a great Batman, and I would have loved to have seen him do his own standalone Batman. And I know he was touted to direct one as well, like write
Yep.
and direct one, but that didn't work out
Mhm.
either. And that obviously had something to do with the Warner Brothers side too, because they were like it when they announced that I think he was pulling away. It was creative differences, which always reads the studio and the creative people just didn't get along, and
Yep.
they can't agree on something. So yeah, it's just a shame. It's like a lot of wasted opportunity, I think.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to describe it. It's just it seems like a lot of wasted opportunity, and a lot of the sentiments you just said, I echo. Like I love the first Wonder Woman, hated the
Yeah.
second Wonder Woman. I thought Henry Cavill was a pretty good Superman, even if his movies were pretty flawed. I didn't mind Ben Affleck as Batman, and was very curious about what a Ben Affleck written and directed movie would be, considering his track record is really damn good for the most part. Like all this stuff you look at and you're just like, yeah, I like I haven't seen all the DC movies. Because I've skipped quite a few of them because don't they just don't look good to me. And I'm sorry. And the Snyder cut thing was the most overblown nonsense I've ever seen in my life. And the fact that now basically anytime a movie comes out and slightly underperforms, or you get some sort of differing opinion of a director from a studio, there starts this trend of like, oh, you need to release the director cut. It's like, no, you don't need a director cut for every single movie. Sometimes the
Yeah.
movie is just the movie, and that was the best thing that could be. And I'm someone that agrees that the directors are usually the ones right, but also sometimes they're not right. And we don't really know that. So like we don't need a stupid director's cut of everything and a friggin' 4 hour Snyder cut of Justice League. I don't need to see a 4 hour movie version of a movie that already sucked. Like it's just a longer version of a movie that sucked.
I think to me, like I completely agree with you. I think that the Snyder Cut thing was just it was so funny that it became fascinating to me. It's like, what is wrong with these people? Like, because if you try to wade into the Snyder Cut territory online too, like you will get ripped to shreds if you say
Oh
anything
God.
negative. It's
Yeah.
terrible. But on just like the topic of director's cuts, like some director's cuts I enjoy, like the Midsommar director cut. I remember liking that one. I thought that was interesting, but I can also see why it got cut. And then what was that Ed Norton movie? He directed it. And he was in it. I can't remember the name of it, but I just remember watching it and thinking he needed somebody to tell him he shouldn't be doing all of this stuff. Like he needed
Yeah,
somebody to
right?
say, no, Mr. Norton, this is not like we should not be doing this. We should be doing this instead, or you should cut this, or you should edit it this way. And like you'd need someone to rein you in sometimes, because if you don't, like directors they're fallible creatures. They're not just because, even Chris Nolan or like Steven
Mhm.
Spielberg or Martin Scorsese, like like the best to do it, they need good people around them to lend a second eye, a third eye, a fourth eye. And that's how you get great movies, because it's never just a singular vision. It's the vision of a ton of people working together. And that's what a good director does, is listen to a lot of different people. Now, I won't say that the Justice Cut, Joss Whedon's version, because I will admit, I think that was a bit of a unique situation. It's not a
Yes, it
normal,
was.
oh, the director's cut, like the studio interview. It's like there was a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes in that. And so I kind of understood where the desire to see the quote unquote Snyder cut came from. But you're right. It kind of snowballed into this very odd thing of, like I know you mentioned Suicide Squad, like a lot of people talk about the Ayer cut, like David Ayer's
Oh
cut
my
of that,
God.
but he
No.
he kind of perpetuates it, because he went and goes, that's the version that went out is not the version that I made, or it's not the version I wanted. And I'm not gonna say he's right or wrong or anything like that, but when you look at the trailer and the way the trailer's cut, I've never seen such. I don't know if there's another example of there being such a distance between the quality of a trailer versus the quality of the movie. Like the quality of the Suicide Squad trailer is amazing. It looks like it's going to be
Mhm.
the greatest movie you've ever seen. Then the movie itself sucked, and there's this really weird disconnect. But he even is the one who said, like, who knows, maybe my version will get released one day. And you're just kind of like, David, please, like, let's
Yeah.
let it lie. I know sometimes you just got to take that loss and just say it is what it is. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, like the whole DC Marvel thing, they've been in competition with each other since the 20s, 30s when the comics came
Yeah.
out, right? Like
Yeah.
it's always been a thing between them. And like I said before about like competition, like it's healthy having both of them do really well, because it pushes the other. Because like look at what Marvel has been doing. Because they've been such a runaway success, they don't care about quality anymore. No offense, Marvel fans,
Mm-hmm.
but they just don't. Like this last year, if you look at the Marvel products that have come out, they've all been fairly mediocre. None of them have really made a huge impact in like pop culture, like in discussion either. And to me, that just says a lot because they ran away with the competition. Nobody was biting at their heels to force them to do something interesting or unique. And that's why you need DC to do well, because like you want the two of them to push the other to make really, really great films or really, really great TV shows. And without one, when someone just runs away with it, you get what Marvel's year has been, which is really lukewarm nonsense.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the whole positive, one of the positive aspects of this DC shakeup does seem to be that they are fine with Matt Reeves, the Batman series, kind
Yes.
of continuing and being its own thing, that they don't plan of connecting it with with a larger universe at all.
Yeah. The
And
Todd
whatever
Phillips
your
Joker
thoughts
as well.
are, on Todd Phillips and the Joker and Joaquin Phoenix's performance, they're also keeping that its own thing and not connecting it to anything. Despite, I think, people, fans of DC have been wanting the Batman to sort of then get its own world and somehow be connected to everything. And I think they're being smart, being like, no, for now, it's its own thing. We're not going to worry about connecting it. Yes, it might get some spin-offs and stuff like that, but that is still contained with its own universe and doesn't connect with the rest of the stuff. It's not connected to Aquaman. It's not connected to the Justice League, all that sort of stuff.
I'm also just sick of everything needing a connection. We don't need everything to be connected anymore. Like I've seen
Yeah.
people, what did they call it? Like the Wes Anderson cinematic universe. I'm like, no, it's just a director with all his movies. And yes, he
Yeah.
works with a lot of the same people, but it's not, we don't need to connect this is the thing with Marvel again. Like they have made it so it seems like you need to connect everything, that everything needs to, you got to watch that TV show and that movie to get this, to get that. But then what ends up happening is, in my opinion, what Marvel ended up doing was like creating commercials for their next thing. And then like a movie was basically a commercial for the next movie. And then the TV show is a commercial for the next movie or the next show. So I'm very happy for DC to just let it lie and just say, we can have these individual standalone things, and have them exist in their own worlds, because that's how we've been doing movies for a very long time. So it's fine. It's absolutely fine to do. But I love the Batman, so and I love Robert Pattinson as the Batman too. So I'm really, really happy they kept that, because I wasn't, when they announced all these changes, I was like, there's no way they get rid of Pattinson, do they? But then when they said like Henry Cavill's not coming back, I was like, oh, like, oh dear, maybe Pattinson's not as safe as I thought he was. But thankfully he's still there. So I'm really looking forward to what they do with that, because that one would have really sucked, because that one showed Batman before he really becomes the Batman and the Bruce Wayne that we know. And I think for a lot of people, there was a bit of disconnect when they watched that movie. They were like, but he doesn't seem like Bruce Wayne. It's like, that's kind of the point, is like, we're going to see him develop into Bruce Wayne and to Batman. So it would have really sucked if they just ended it with this movie and we never got to see the progress.
Yeah. I think for the most part, you look at what has been kept, and the stuff that has been kept has all been very well received, not just monetarily, but like actually in the film discourse community has been well reviewed. And, the Batman was, one of the best reviewed superhero movies ever, I would say. Aquaman has constantly been told that it's probably the funniest and most consistent of all the DC films going. The Suicide Squad, which obviously James Gunn is not going to kill his own baby, had a very successful movie and a very successful spin-off show, and both of those look to be set up for success. Word is that they're going to keep Margot Robbie and Harley Quinn, because that has also done quite well as far as reviews go. It's not, so it seems like they're taking things, not just money, into consideration, which I sort of appreciate.
Yes and no, I would say to that. Just again, like the Henry Cavill, the Gal Gadot thing, like I actually think those guys are pretty good at their roles and what they do. And yes,
but the
Wonder
movies
Woman,
haven't been great though.
yeah,
Like the first Wonder Woman was really good, but the second one was so terrible, despite the fact that Patty Jenkins had something like 2 years to edit the movie, and she kept it as confusing and as big of a mess as it was. Like, she had access to that movie to edit.
I get that, but you know, I don't know. To me, it's just like it's one bad movie. I don't know if I would say it's terrible. Like it's not good. Like I didn't really like it, but there are some people who enjoyed it. But it's, to me, it's just like, you can't just say because one didn't do well, you cut the whole franchise like that, because you have to look at it a bit more holistically of saying Gal Gadot as an actress is somewhat limited at times. I think we can agree with that. But her in the Wonder Woman role, I think, has been quite good. Like, I actually think they have formed the role around her to suit her skills and her abilities. And so it's, to me, it's not just saying, oh, is the second movie was shit and it didn't do well and this and that. It's like, you can't, I don't know. To me, like that's not a good enough reason, because like, let's point to Marvel, like Thor 2 sucked. Thor 2 was like probably one of the worst movies Marvel has ever put out. And yet they got a 3 and a 4. Do you know what I mean? Like, you kind of have to give sometimes a shot, because not every movie is going to land. That's just you. If you're expecting every single movie in your franchise to land and to do really well critically and commercially, you would be left with a lot of like lopped off franchises, because not every single movie is going to do well. Like, you're not always going to get a banger every single time. I'm trying to think of a franchise. Oh, like Planet of the Apes. That's my favorite. They've done those. All 3 of those are really good, but it just doesn't happen that often. So to me, I don't know. I get what you mean though by like they are picking and choosing, but I still think the idea not to bring back Cavill, not to bring back Gal Gadot, I find those 2 decisions in particular kind of baffle me a little bit as to why they weren't able to finish off their arcs at least. And if you are going to do a refresh, then do a straight refresh of everybody. So to me, the picking and choosing it's a bit of an odd thing, because I wonder just how are they deciding that, because you have 2 quite good fan favorites and they're not coming back. So I don't really understand that.
Yeah. Okay. I think we should move on, because I think we spent a lot of time on this topic. One of the last things we want to talk about is the "Don't Worry, Darling" drama. And, you know, I prefaced it earlier about why we're including this when it seems so gossipy, because yes, it is. But on the other hand, it actually related to an actual movie and its release, and how word of mouth might work in the present day of social media hot takes and things like that. So this is something you have to consider. I'm going to link to a timeline in the show notes, and it's way too much to kind of go over in detail, but like, wow, was there so much going on? Did you read through the article that I sent you?
Yeah, I did. And I will say I was following along with great curiosity the whole time, because to me it was just, I don't know, it's like, and it's funny, we talked about you know, older people, younger people using social media. Olivia Wilde was very clearly someone who showed she does not know how to use the media very well. Yes. And she misjudged everything that she put out there, thinking that she could capitalize on, you know, one of my favorite things was her doing, I think it was a Harper's Bazaar profile, and talking about how like no men orgasm in my movie. Yeah. Like, and kind of like it was this big like feminist point she was trying to make, and like only females orgasm in my movie. And then if you've seen the movie, you can understand how misguided and how inappropriate of a thing to praise in your film. That, like, that point alone, like, according to the story she put out there. But then on top of that, then when a bunch of people were criticizing the film for, I think, being overtly sexual, and like it was all about the sex scenes between Harry Styles and Florence Pugh, then she comes out later and says, well, people are just focusing on the sex too much. Yeah. Like, well, Olivia, you kind of pointed people to that. But yeah, a whole bunch of it was just, you know, it was never going to be that the movie would be more interesting than all the behind the scenes nonsense that happened. And there was just so much random stuff that was going on, and, you know, feuds, and, you know, just funny social media back and forth, like really passive aggressive social media things happening between the cast and the director. And then of course you watch the movie, and the movie is not nearly as interesting as what the behind the scenes is. And it's just, and the funny thing is the 2 best things about that movie are, in my opinion, Florence Pugh, of course, But also Olivia Wilde is a good director, and you can clearly see that in the movie. But she just kept shooting herself in the foot through the entire promotional aspect of this movie. That it really made me laugh because I've never really felt anything strongly about Olivia Wilde. Now I do.
Yeah.
But
It's funny because like I was a huge fan of Booksmart, and I know a lot of people sort of feel similarly about that. It's kind of like a film Twitter adored movie sort of thing. And I know
Yeah.
other people are a little more lukewarm on it. I know you, I think if I could speak for you, you liked it, but you didn't love it. Would that be accurate?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. But like it was generally regarded as a good movie, depending on your thoughts on coming of age films and all that sort of stuff. It didn't exactly break the mold by any means, but like it was nice to kind of see a coming of age movie about two young girls and one of them being a queer woman and things like that. And so it's just sort of a breath of fresh air considering the types of movies we get of these similar types of stories. All it had to do was say, oh, hey, Olivia Wilde, the person that did Booksmart, a movie most of you liked, is coming out with a new movie. Cool. That sounds interesting. I'm probably going to check it out. And then you will watch it and you'll be like, oh, you know what? Like, I kind of dug the idea. The concept was interesting. Florence Pugh, always great.
Yeah.
Yeah, it didn't really stick the landing and it's a little confusing and muddled at times, but whatever. It would be forgotten about. And then when she comes out with her next movie, whatever. But instead now it becomes this case study of how to not promote a movie, how to rein in egos, how like all this sort of nonsense of like professionalism, ethics, all this sort of stuff that has come out. The affair between Olivia Wilde and Harry Styles, did that break up the Jason Sudeikis Olivia Wilde marriage? Was there fighting going on between Florence and Olivia? Was the cast even talking to each other? The Shia LaBeouf drama of, was he fired? Did he walk away? Like, why is he even still getting parts considering what an abusive piece of shit he is? All this sort of stuff that's going on, and you're just like, none of this was necessary at all.
The Shia LaBeouf thing is funny to me because he's such a villain on Twitter as well. Like on social media, people really don't like him. But for the first time, people are like, "You're seriously going to make me defend Shia LaBeouf right now?" Like I'm on his side of all people. But yeah. It was such a mess. And you're right. Like this would have been a movie that people just would have forgotten about eventually. And like we just talked about letting, you have to make room for failure in film. Like that, it's impossible. Not every director is going to have a flawless, filmography. And that is it's very rare for that to happen. So for Olivia Wilde to have one movie that kind of goes, it's not great. It's fine. She would have gotten another shot. Like I think she's a big enough star in her own right. But also I think Booksmart gave her enough credibility that it's like, it's okay if one movie, because it's not a complete disaster either. I think that some people muddled it to say it was a disaster. I don't think it was, but there's enough good in there that you would say she's obviously going to get another shot, and it could have just been that, but it just kept rolling into. And the funniest thing is just because it was her doing it, like it was her just not stop. Like she kept talking,
shooting yourself in her foot nonstop.
And you're just like, Olivia, stop talking. Like, stop granting interviews. Stop doing all of this. Stop pointing fingers and blaming this, that, and the other. Just accept the fact that the movie didn't turn out as great as you had wanted it to, or maybe as great as you had thought it was. Or just not even just great. Like, audiences didn't connect with it in the way that you had hoped. That's fine. That happens to 90% of the movies out there. But she just kept going. It's like, Olivia, you got to stop, lady. Like this is, and then I hated, like one of the things that I didn't like was a lot of people coming to defend her and saying like, well, you wouldn't be this rough on a male director. It's like, no, you would have. But the thing is though, a male director would 100% get another shot at this. And I was like, don't make this some feminist thing, because Olivia Wilde will get another shot at this. Like she absolutely will. And so I just kind of, there was a lot of stuff going on with this story, which is why I was kind of happy, because like you said, we don't normally, for this episode, you don't normally like want to pick out the gossipy stuff. And so when I saw Don't Worry Darling, I was like, ooh, slightly gossipy, but there was just a lot going on. And one of the funnier / tragic things to happen in movies this year was definitely that one.
Yeah. And like, I think compounded with all the Olivia Wilde not being able to shut the hell up was also people got really sick of Harry Styles this year. The fact that like he was just on the radio so much, and I like his music. I think he's quite talented. I now turn the station when I hear his music come on because I am tired of it as well, and that sort of takes a lot for me to do. And it was just sort of this, breathlessly awaiting his big lead role because he was in Dunkirk. Sorry, he was in Dunkirk, very small part, and he was fine in that movie. Mm-hmm. But like you couldn't really judge his performance in that movie because he has like 2 lines and he's in the background for like 10 minutes and that's it. That's all you see of him. And then so it was like between this and My Policeman, it was just like, oh my God, everyone's talking about him. He had a hit album out and all this sort of stuff. And he was also, I feel like, causing a lot of drama for himself as well. It's just like, well, I just think of like, the spitting thing with Chris Pine and like people talk like I feel like it was he was more of a byproduct that just ended up being the focal point of a lot of people's hate because people love to sort of take down someone when they're at the top. Yeah. And it's just the nature of everything, especially when it's a pop star. You can go back the past 30, 40 years and anytime there's like a pop star that's on top of the game, everyone wants to be like, well, they're not actually that great. And it's just like, well, that's fine. You don't have to like them. Who cares? Just shut up. Like not everything is for you. Like that's my biggest thing is like, just shut up. Not everything's for you. But yeah, if the biggest issue with Don't Worry, Darling was the script, if we're talking about it purely from a movie making standpoint, because as you talked about, Florence Pugh was great. Chris Pine, brought a good energy, even if his character was pretty blah. Olivia Wilde clearly is a very talented director. Her staging and eye for setups is great. The production design on this movie looked absolutely fantastic. Like all the technical aspects of this, the costumes, the music, the set design, all that stuff looked really good. Harry Styles was whatever. You can chalk it up to someone who's not traditionally an actor doing an acting performance, and he was fine. He was passable. He wasn't the worst thing ever, as some people claimed he was. Could have been cast better, sure, but it's not like he ruined the movie. But the problem was that the story wasn't great. And that's about it.
Yeah, there's a we were talking about like director's cuts. There's you can find the actual script, like the original script for this, because they adapted it. I think I can't remember what the story is. I think it's Olivia Wilde, her production team bought the script and then they changed the ending. So there's actually the original story has a completely different ending to what it is, and it's quite something. I'll just say that. Go find it if you want it, but there's certain lines, like it's kind of funny to think that it would have been Harry Styles in that. But yeah, it definitely, the original one goes in a completely different way, and one that is quite not completely. It's like it does retain elements of what Olivia Wilde ended up doing. But there is a different ending for anybody interested, and you can find that online somewhere. But the thing with the script is, there was one storyline in there that I thought was really interesting, which was Kiki Lane's story. And she is the one who, what was her role? She basically was the first one to, like, she killed herself. Sorry, spoiler alert for this movie. She's the one who, like, is the one to make Florence Pugh's character start to see cracks in what was going on in their little bubble. And her character is given very, very little time, and like there's not much going on there, but it's probably the more interesting role. And the rumor was that Kiki Lane's stuff, she actually filmed a lot more and there was more to her story, but it ended up getting cut. And a lot of people say in favor of Olivia Wilde's character getting a bit more screen time. Do with that what you will. But I think that there was a missed opportunity there for that character. I think the character's name was Margaret. For that character to shine a little bit more, because I think you could have introduced something really interesting there. So it's just a bit of a shame. I don't know. It's but again, like, so many movies don't come together, and this is just one of those that maybe they tinkered around with the original script a little bit too much. And like you said at the top of this one, it's about ego as well, and Olivia Wilde certainly I think has shown that she has a healthy ego, and this movie was definitely something that kind of pampered to that.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. And then sort of the last thing I want to touch on is the top 10 highest grossing movies of the year. I'll quickly sort of run through them, the names and roughly how much they made. So number 1, Top Gun Maverick with $718 million. Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, $439 million. Number 3, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, $411 million. Number 4, Avatar, The Way of Water, $446 million. Interesting. I don't know why that is afterwards. I'm pulling these numbers from Box Office Mojo. Number 5, Jurassic World Dominion, $376 million. Minions, The Rise of Gru at number 6 with $369 million. Number 7, The Batman, just below that with $369 million as well. 8, Thor, Love and Thunder, $343 million. 9, Spider-Man No Way Home, $804 million. I guess that's the total gross, not necessarily the yearly gross. And number 10, Sonic the Hedgehog 2 at $190 million. So yeah, these numbers aren't quite perfect, but the order is correct. Obviously, the big thing that stands out is we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the 10 movies are superhero movies, which is no shock in this day and age. Not a single movie here is an original. They're all sequels as well, except for the Batman, which is based on pre-existing franchises as well. So that would be the closest thing to an original since it was the first in this new reboot. But yeah, what are your thoughts on this top 10?
Not surprising, I suppose. And it's interesting. Like if you look at the worldwide box office, like 3 of those movies hit the billion mark as well. So it's Top Gun, Avatar, Jurassic World. They all went over $1 billion worldwide, which is, I think, really encouraging for the cinema industry in general, because there was a lot of talk posts, even before pandemic, actually, about like, oh, cinema's dying and things like that. And this year, there were a lot of movies that kind of really not begged audiences to come back, but they really encouraged audiences to come back. They gave audiences a reason to go and pay for a ticket, because movie tickets are quite expensive. So it made people, like for Top Gun Maverick, people went so many times to go watch Top Gun Maverick. Avatar has just been smashing it right now and doing very, very well. Jurassic World, I don't even want to talk about that one. I don't know why people went to go watch that, but it's in even movies like Nope, like it didn't hit the top 10 or anything like that, but there was a lot of spectacle this year, which I think was really interesting. And Jordan Peele talked about, and I know Tom Cruise has talked about it too, which was their intention to make these movies. For Jordan Peele in particular, he said that when he made Nope, he conceived of the idea during the pandemic, and part of what he had in mind was bringing people back to the cinema, like creating such a spectacle, a movie so wide in scope that people would be like, I have to go watch it in IMAX. I have to go watch it in a really big screen. And obviously Tom Cruise very famously held back releasing Top Gun from, I think it was 2020. That should have been the year it was supposed to come out. And Paramount was like begging him to let them put it onto their streaming service. And he's like, nope, we're not doing that. And ends up being a really good call, because this is shockingly his first $1 billion movie, which I find incredible that it took Tom Cruise this long to get $1 billion movie. But yeah, I think it's wonderful. Like, I think it's this idea of showing people are willing to go back to the theater. Maybe it is for just the big stuff, but you got to give them a reason to go. And whether that is, it's typically through quite stunning visuals, really. But I think Top Gun Maverick, that to me was the news story of the year, was that it created such hype amongst not just quote unquote film Twitter, but everyone I knew went to watch it. They loved it. Like people who aren't really into movies, they went to go watch Top Gun and they were obsessed with it. And it didn't matter who you were too. Because I know Top Gun typically is seen as like a boy thing from back in the 80s. It just didn't matter. You could be young, old, guy, girl, neither. And you would love it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I think it was such an event this year that it made me quite happy to see like one movie, even if it's a sequel, blah, 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 like whatever. It made me happy to see like people going back out and excited to go back out to go watch a movie.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It was one of the most fun experiences I had in movie theaters this year. It's terrific. It truly is. And like, I know it seems like everyone's like, Top Gun Maverick can't be that good. And then they'll watch it
I
and be like, you know
know.
what? No, it was that good. It
It's
was.
so
And
fun.
I actually felt the exact same way. I
Yeah.
don't know if I've told the story on the podcast or not, but I've said it a few times where I had zero interest in this movie whatsoever. I had never seen the original Top Gun, did not care at all. And I was sitting at home and talking with my wife. And we're like, hey, you want to go to the movies tomorrow? And I'm like, yeah. You want to see Top Gun Maverick? And I was like, yeah, I guess so. And I had never seen Top Gun, and she had seen it before. So like, let's just watch the first Top Gun today. And I'm like, okay, cool. So we did that. And I was like, it's fine. I don't really like it that much. It's very cheesy. It's whatever. And so we went and saw Top Gun Maverick the next day, and it was incredible. It's going to make my top 10 of the year list. It's so good.
It's a very feel good movie, isn't it? It's just fun. Like, it's just really, really good fun. And I don't, you haven't seen Avatar still, have you?
No, not yet.
So Avatar, a lot of people have been asking, like, should I go watch it? Is it worth it? And in my opinion, yes, it is. Even though the story sucks, even though the dialogue is atrocious, go watch it, because there's something really interesting in Avatar, just in the visuals and the technical side of things of what James Cameron was able to do. But I always like when somebody asks me about like Avatar, I always have to like preface that. I have to be like, it is worth it. However, know that this thing sucks about it, but this kind of outweighs the thing that sucks. But I do have to make that caveat. You know, with Top Gun Maverick, one, I don't think I've ever really had to make any recommendations for that. But if somebody were to ask me, is it worth to watch? I'd be like, yes, just go watch it. Like, I don't need to caveat anything about Top Gun Maverick. It's just like, just go watch it in a movie theater, because it's really good. It's really fun. And again, it doesn't matter who you are. You're going to enjoy it. You're going to have a good time with that movie.
Yeah, I absolutely agree there. And nice to see the Batman do so well.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that it is not an original IP, it is the first in the franchise, and considering everything else is a sequel, it's nice to see that it cracked the top 10 too.
Yeah, I mean, I think you and I are both very big Batman people, just generally speaking. So yeah, it's nice that it did so well, and also it was a different type of Batman. It was long too. Again, it was a year of very long movies. Like, all these movies are quite lengthy, and not all of them. I shouldn't say all of them, but like they're fairly. You know, even Spider-Man No Way Home, I feel like that one was longer than a typical. Well, actually, no, Marvel movies can be kind of long, depending on what it is.
Do you have any sort of last thoughts on the movie year of 2022 as far as newsworthy stories goes?
I think we've covered it all. It's been a very eventful year in film, as per the usual. I'm kind of glad that now, even though I've brought it up a few times, like, I'm glad that the narrative of like return to movies is starting to go by the wayside now, because we are back. And
yes,
so that's nice that we've kind of moved on from it, because that also means that the world has kind of gotten a little bit better, hopefully. Fingers crossed. I shouldn't say that. I'm gonna jinx it. But yeah, it's nice. And I mean, as much as I enjoy that people are coming back, it would be nice to see, you know, the middle tier of films kind of make a resurgence and come back. But I'm glad at least horror is finding new audiences and new filmmakers coming through. So that's really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Yeah, I think that sort of wraps up our episode. You know, we're going to transition into doing more Oscar stuff as Oscar season kind of approaches. But we'll probably after that do a movie preview list once we have a better idea of what is actually coming out in 2022. We, of course, have our best movies of the year list coming out. I helped contribute to that shelf's movies of the year list. I submitted my top 10 as it was at the time of submission, which obviously is probably going to change a little bit, but I'll link to that in the show notes in case people want to check that out. But yeah, this wraps up our show. Rachel, where can people find you and what are you working on?
I will say I missed the deadline for the That Shelf article. I kind of forgot about it, and so I didn't get to submit anything for it. What am I working on? I'll say that for the Asian cut, we just posted an interview today with Andrew Fung for Run the Burbs. Karen Tran wrote a really, really great piece about kind of, not, I don't want to just say diversity because I feel like that sounds boring, but like a really interesting piece on how that movie's made and kind of the pressure that the showrunners feel like they're under to be authentic in their portrayals. So yeah, go check that out. And in terms of me, you can find me rachelkh.com. and _ Rachel KH on Twitter as well.
You also have, I know it's been a couple weeks now, but several reviews from Whistler Film Festival up on the Asian Cut as well.
Oh yeah, there's that. We took a little bit of a break during the Christmas time, but yeah, there's always go check out the Asian Cut. We're always hoping to like fill it with more stuff, and we have our top 10 coming out soon, and there's going to be an interview with the director of Leonor Will Never Dies, which is a really great Filipino movie. For anybody who's watched it, a lot of people really love it. So yeah, we got an interview coming out with that with Alicia Mughal, who friend of the show. She's
yes. I know Jeff Ballmer will be very excited about that interview because he loved that movie at TIFF.
Yeah, there's such a strong fan base for that movie. Like people, I watched it and I didn't particularly connect with it in the same way that a lot of other people have. But Alicia loved it, and yeah, when we did the Exclaim top 10, or not top 10, we asked different writers for like their 10 favorite movies. Alicia actually included it in her top 10. So, it's definitely quirky, but if you're quirky, I think you'll like that movie. Yeah.
Yeah. I was recently a guest on the Technically a Conversation podcast where host Jose Gomez wrote a teleplay about a Christmas seance, and I got to do a bit of voice acting on that, which was a lot of fun. So if you want a spooky and funny little podcast to check out, listen to the episode that will be found in the show notes. As mentioned, I was involved with that shelf's top 10 list, and I also participated in Bill Antoniou's Criterion shelf, where I wrote about House of Flying Daggers, which was a lot of fun to be able to participate in an article that I greatly admire and respect. And House of Flying Daggers is an excellent movie.
Who knew?
Who knew? But you can follow this show on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at contrazoompod, and let us know what you thought was the biggest news story of the year for you. Send an email to contrazoompod@gmail.com. Thank you to Eric and Kevin Smale for the theme music, and to Stephanie Pryor for the logo design. If you like to listen to podcasts on YouTube, we do post all episodes there as well. And if you like listening to the show, consider tipping us on coffee. Thanks for checking us out, and thank you to That Shelf.